Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the New and Young Masons Conference for May. I'm really excited this evening, to have the Ashlar Club of Sussex, who are going to introduce the guest speaker, and this is ultimately their conference. It's my home province, so I'm really looking forward to this. The conference call is going to be recorded, so we will have that recorded and available on our YouTube channel to rewatch later at another date. If everybody could stay muted for me, that would be great. Any questions that you have, please could you put them in the chat box during the presentation, and Worshipful Brother Ray Collins will, Brother Ray Collins will then field the questions for our speaker, Paul Calderwood. So what I will do now is pass straight over to Ray Collins of the Ashlar Club. Ray, if you want to unmute yourself.
Yep, thank you, James.
Thank you, Ray. To you.
Yeah, good evening and welcome, and thank you for the 50 of us that are here who have registered and joined us this afternoon / this evening. I'm representing the Ashlar Club, which is one of the 5 light blue clubs that we've got in the province of Sussex. We cover the north and central part of the province. We have been going just over 4 years. I took over as chairman of the club about a month ago, so this is very nice that I've been able to be with you to host on our behalf today. We've got a very interesting presentation this evening with our guest speaker, the very worshipful brother, Dr. Paul Calderwood, past Grand Sword Bearer. Paul is coming into us from the Welsh Mountains, so if there are any issues with his internet connection, he will try and rejoin us again. That is not meant as a joke, but Paul asked me to say that. He's going to give us a presentation this evening on Freemasonry and the Royal Family. So without further ado, I just will reiterate that obviously any questions that you have for Paul, pop them into the chat and I will take a note of them during Paul's presentation. You should have all been sent a family tree, whether you've printed it or got it on a screen, which will assist you with Paul's presentation. So sit back, enjoy, and I'll hand you over to Paul. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Ray. Hello, everyone, and thank you very much for inviting me to give the talk and for you all turning up. I'm going to try and share with you my screen because I've got some slides and pictures that will hopefully make the thing a bit more interesting. So bear with me for a second while I try and get that working. I'm pleased to hear that the handouts that I would normally offer people have been distributed. Let me just try and get over there. And oh, there we are. I moved that over there. Okay. So slideshow from beginning. There we go. Can you all see that? Anyone? Good. Okay, lovely. I've got a thumbs up. Good. So let me start. So I'm going to start a bit like a novel, not at the very beginning. I'm going to start in the middle with a dramatic event, which I hope will engage your interest. I'm going to start with the Year of the Three Kings. And the three kings that I'm referring to are not the three kings that came at Christmas, but the three British kings who ruled in 1936. It was a year that opened with George V wearing the crown, something that on the 20th of January passed to his eldest son, Edward VIII, who only remained king for 11 months, and in December he abdicated, as you're probably well aware, and George VI ascended the throne. So all within one calendar year, 3 kings. Now, on that dramatic day in December in 1936, when Edward VIII abdicated, the presence of Freemasonry crept into the very last seconds of his reign and the very first seconds of the next reign. On the day of the abdication, the new king, George VI, wrote regarding his older brother, "When we said goodbye, we kissed, parted as Freemasons, and he bowed to me as his king." That was how he summed the event up. The departing king, Edward VIII, had been known for decades, of course, as the Prince of Wales, and he was one of the most popular men to have ever held that title, popular at least until 1936. He was, in fact, the 4th Prince of Wales to be a Freemason, and the 4th of 5 British kings who were Freemasons. For nearly 300 years, royalty has played an important part in the life of Freemasonry in Britain, and equally, Freemasonry has played an important part in the life of the nation's royal family. So why is this subject important, you might ask? Well, partly because it had a very big and very direct influence, not only on the status of Freemasonry in this country, but also on its growth. Now, because, let me remember to change a slide now and again, that was the year of the 3 kings, because of the publicity which was brought to Freemasonry by royal involvement, many people were intrigued to know why so many members of the royal family should want to become Masons, and it prompted many to follow suit, partly out of curiosity and partly in search of status, and probably for many other reasons. The Masonic orders, just like any other organisation that's blessed with the prestige and public attention that flows from the involvement of royalty, showed its appreciation to the royals with rapid promotion, obviously, through their ranks. As a result, some members of the royal family became Grand Masters, past Grand Masters, provincial Grand Masters, and were actively involved in the senior management of the organisation. The close association between the royal family and Freemasonry, however, began in the 1700s, and that's where your handout, I hope, is going to be of help to you in staying on track with me as I try and work my way through this family tree as quickly as I can. The first members of the British royal family to enter the order were Frederick Lewis, Prince of Wales, who was initiated in 1737. And he was followed by his brother, the Duke of Cumberland, in 1743. 3 of Frederick Lewis's sons also became Masons, the Dukes of York, Gloucester and Cumberland. And although his eldest son, who later became King George III, did not become a Mason, 6 of George III's sons did. Interesting little aside here that you're all familiar, I'm sure, with the expression a Lewis, and there are many explanations as to why the son of a Mason coming into Masonry should be called a Lewis. And one of the most compelling theories is in the story of Frederick Lewis's initiation and the entry of his sons. Well, now, they were, so I've got it, the 6 sons of George III came in, and they were the second Prince of Wales that figures in our story, the man who later became King George IV. There we go. And the first of our Masonic kings. His brothers, the Dukes of Clarence, who later became King William IV, and the second of our Masonic kings, and his brothers, Dukes of York, Sussex, Cumberland, and Kent. And Kent is a name that's going to crop up quite a bit tonight. Now, Queen Victoria, that's the Duke of Kent I'm talking about, the first one in our story. His daughter, Queen Victoria, demonstrated her support of Freemasonry by becoming a patron of the Royal Masonic Institution for Boys and the Royal Masonic Institution for Girls throughout her life, as well as permitting members of her family to hold high office in our organisation, and for this to be very publicly displayed. For example, 3 of her sons became Masons, and 2 of them, who are on the screen at the moment, pictures, became Grand Masters of the United Grand Lodge of England in succession. She died, as you know from your history, in 1901, and during the century that followed her death, at least 16 more members of the royal family in Britain either became Masons or provided the organisation with valuable patronage. At the start of the 20th century, the most high-profile Freemason was, of course, our 3rd Prince of Wales, Albert Edward, Queen Victoria's eldest son, who was Grand Master of the United Grand Lodge from 1874 until 1901, as well as holding the most senior positions in almost all the other Masonic orders. The period of his Grand Mastership of the United Grand Lodge of England saw remarkable growth in the Brotherhood, with the number of lodges on the roll almost doubling during that 27 years that he was Grand Master. In 1901, he became king, and scores of deputations were permitted to make loyal presentations to him in person. And the last of those selected deputations, at the king's special request, was from Freemasonry, a sign of how important Freemasonry was in his life. And in reply to their good wishes on that occasion, he said the following: "I shall not cease, now that I'm king, to retain the same deep interest that I've always felt in Freemasonry. As protector of Freemasons, I shall continue to watch over your interests and rejoice over the prosperity and growth which I anticipate for you in future." Well, now, moving up from being Prince of Wales to becoming king posed a dilemma for Edward, one that hadn't been faced by either of the previous Masonic monarchs, that is to say George IV or William IV. And it was simply this, that he wasn't simply a Mason, a member of the organisation, but he was a holder of high office, indeed the highest office within the order. Well, now, to avoid any apparent conflict of interest, he was persuaded to resign as Grand Master and head of the various orders, but nevertheless he retained his membership, and indeed he assumed the newly created title of Protector of Freemasons in Britain. He also confirmed his continuing endorsement of the Masonic charities, becoming the chief patron. So now let's go back to the start of his reign for a moment, 1901. When he became king, he was succeeded by his brother, Prince Arthur, the Duke of Connaught, the 3rd, and most people would say the favourite son of Queen Victoria. Initiated into Freemasonry at the age of 24 in the Prince of Wales Lodge, number 259, by his brother, Albert Edward, he became an enthusiastic Mason. He joined many lodges, and he was exalted into Royal Arch Masonry in 1877. Masonic honours followed, of course, but it was his installation as Grand Master in 1901, which was attended, incidentally, by 9,000 brethren, that transformed his media profile as a Freemason. The Albert Hall was the setting in the days before health and safety and limitation of the number of people that could be squeezed into the Royal Albert Hall. Also in 1901, he went on to become Grand Master of Mark Grand Lodge and gradually all of the other Masonic orders too, almost all of them. On a number of occasions, he laid the foundation stone for important public buildings, dressed in full Masonic regalia, and at the head of a Masonic delegation also in regalia. The Connaught Rooms in London, Cardiff and Swansea and many other places, and indeed many lodges, were named after him. He was a very enthusiastic and popular Grand Master. However, by 1938, he was 89 at that stage and in poor health, announced that he intended to make way for a younger man as head of the various Masonic orders. And it set off a great wave of national newspaper articles and tributes to his long leadership at a time when Freemasonry was much more publicly noticed for all the right reasons in the media. As the longest serving Grand Master in British Freemasonry up until that time, his influence had been enormous. He later wrote, "Of the many and varied interests which have occupied me during a long life, I look back upon none with greater affection and satisfaction than my association with Freemasonry." And he did lead a very crowded and busy life. Well, now, he was his nephew, later known as George V, did not follow in the footsteps of his father, Edward VII, or his uncle, the Duke of Connaught, or his own older brother, the Duke of Albany, by becoming a Freemason. Nevertheless, he did provide Freemasonry with valuable support in different ways. For example, messages of appreciation from him were read at meetings of United Grand Lodge throughout his reign. These messages acknowledged Masonic loyalty and what he called that close association which has always existed between Freemasons and the members of my house. On his accession, George V became patron of both the Royal Masonic Institution for Boys and the Royal Masonic Institution for Girls. And together with his wife, Queen Mary, he conferred the prestige of a royal visit on the Masonic hospitals in Fulham Road and Ravenscourt Park, as well as on the Masonic Peace Memorial in Great Queen Street. More importantly, for it was to have a profound effect upon the organisation's status and growth, he permitted 3 of his sons to become high-profile members of our organisation and for his daughter to marry a very highly placed Mason, later the Programme Master. George V's eldest son, you see him in the middle of the picture here, Edward Albert, whose abdication we took as our starting point tonight, proved to be an outstanding source of public attention for Freemasonry. And just let me break off for a second and gauge your interest in that photograph. Very interesting picture. You see 3 sons of George V there, all outside Freemasons Hall in Great Queen Street, entering for the inauguration of the building, led by the Prince of Wales. Just behind him, you'll see his brother, the Duke of York, who later became George VI. And coming up from the car is the Duke of Kent, the father of the present Duke of Kent. So let's come back to the man leading the, and you notice he's stepping off with his left foot, don't you? Now, the man leading the group of the family into Freemasons Hall on that day, his initiation took place in 1919, just after the end of the Great War. It was well publicised, and quite unlike that of his predecessors. His grandfather, for example, Edward, who became Edward VII, had been initiated discreetly overseas, in Sweden, in fact, in 1868, with the news leaking out much later. Even his mother didn't know about it, and she was fairly cross when she found out at first. But in the case of this particular Prince of Wales that we're looking at on the screen at the moment, the publicity build-up for his initiation began 8 days before the occasion. It was made by an announcement via the Press Association, and it led to a series of very long articles leading up to and following the event in the national press. At the festive board after his initiation, the Prince expressed pleasure, of course, as following in the footsteps of both his grandfather, Edward VII, and his great uncle, the Duke of Connaught, and he declared it was his ardent interest to do his utmost to promote the principles of duty, loyalty, and benevolence upon which Freemasonry rested. Great words from Prince of Wales. Until 1936, he was something of a media icon, a media personality, in a way that has probably never been achieved before by a member of the royal family. His youth, his good looks, his elegance, his easy manner, his modern views were all part of the charm that captivated the media and the public and ensured a ready audience for everything he did. As a result, the Prince's Masonic activities were a subject of deep fascination for the press and the public. For example, the interest and excitement that surrounded the Masonic activities of the Prince surged when it was announced in 1924 that he was to be appointed Provincial Grand Master of Surrey. That event itself generated huge newspaper coverage, similar to those that had appeared before, and at his installation as PGM, he declared, "I'm proud to be Provincial Grand Master of Surrey. I need hardly say that, and I'd like to assure you of my keen interest in the work of every lodge in this province." The depth of the Prince's interest in Freemasonry is also demonstrated by his engagement with the other orders. He went way beyond the craft. He joined the Ancient and Accepted Rite in 1921, and then the Royal Arch. And after joining the Royal Arch, he became first principal in his chapter and later Grand Superintendent for all the Royal Arch chapters in Surrey. And he presided over the annual meetings of Provincial Grand Chapter on numerous occasions. Tim in his PGM's regalia, sorry. On an overseas visit to Africa in 1925, the Prince of Wales demonstrated his enthusiasm and support for Freemasonry again in another way by laying the foundation stone for a new Masonic lodge in southern Rhodesia, which you see here from the newspapers. In 1936, his accession to the throne immediately gave rise to speculation about his intended future role within Freemasonry. And this was eventually resolved by his resignation from active office in all of the orders and his acceptance of the position of past Grand Master of UGLE, rather like his grandfather had done. As we know, his reign lasted only 11 months, and after his abdication, however, he continued his active connection with Freemasonry and remained a member until his death. So we come to the star of that cinema box office hit, The King's Speech, George V's second son, George VI, who was probably the most dedicated royal Freemason of the first half of the century. It was his grandfather, Edward VII, who first inspired his enthusiasm for Freemasonry. His interest in ritual and his feeling for family tradition found expression through Freemasonry. The ideals of the craft, brotherly love, service and truth, appealed to him. His initiation in 1919 was an event the media watched with almost as much interest as when the Prince of Wales had been initiated, and was preceded by similar publicity. At the festive board after his initiation, Prince Albert said this: "I have always wished to become a Freemason. All my life I have heard of Freemasonry, and though there has always been a certain mystery attached to it, I've learned that Freemasons in this country have been a great help to the poor and the friendless, and have been notable for their efforts on behalf of children." King George VI was a zealous Freemason. He was happy and deeply interested in the new world in which he was now introduced, and he at once applied himself with characteristic diligence to the mastering of the ceremonial and its import. Subsequently, together with the Prince of Wales, he too became a member of Rose Choir in 1921, and 4 days later they both became members of the Royal Arch together. Indeed, for much of Albert's Masonic career, he was destined to follow in the footsteps of his older brother, succeeded him in craft masonry as the Senior Grand Warden of UGLE in 1922, and then as Provincial Grand Master, in his case for Middlesex, in 1924. In 1928, like his older brother, unlike his older brother, he was advanced into Mark Masonry, and he later became the Grand Senior Warden of Mark Grand Lodge. In 1931, he was appointed Provincial Grand Master of Middlesex Mark Masonry. When he became king in 1936, he gave up all active offices in Freemasonry, just as his brother Edward VIII and his grandfather Edward VII had done when they became king. But he accepted the titles of past Grand Master of UGLE and of Mark Grand Lodge and of the Knights Templar and of the Grand Lodge of Scotland. To his province of Middlesex, he sent a letter of resignation in which he said it was written with feelings of deep regret that I cease to occupy the position that I have been privileged to hold for nearly 13 years. However, his Masonic life was not destined for the media obscurity that was usually chosen by kings. He continued to take a fervent interest in Freemasonry, and his strong attachment to the organisation led him to break the tradition that a reigning sovereign should not set foot inside Grand Lodge. Thus, in 1937, he did indeed attend Grand Lodge as king in order to be invested as a past Grand Master, and he took the chair, presided over the meeting, and invested a number of grand officers, declaring, "Today, the pinnacle of my Masonic life has been reached, an honour for which I thank you." Having become the only reigning sovereign to officiate at a meeting of UGLE, he repeated that action on 3 subsequent occasions by installing Grand Masters in 1939, in 1943 and in 1948, much to the delight of the members and the attention of the media. And he loudly praised the spiritual and moral value of Freemasonry on those occasions. You see, the screen picture at the moment shows him entering Freemasons Hall for the installation of the Lord Harwood in 1943 as Grand Master. His enthusiasm for Masonry nearly brought him back into Grand Lodge for a 5th time in 1951 to undertake the installation of another Grand Master, but poor health prevented this, and as you know, he died later that year. So we've talked about 2 of George V's sons who became kings, Edward VIII and George VI. The last of the king's sons to become a Freemason was this one, Prince George, Duke of Kent. He was initiated in 1928 in Navy Lodge number 2612. 10 years later, when the Duke of Connaught retired as the head of most Masonic orders, it was Prince George, then Duke of Kent, who succeeded him in, amongst other things, the Grand Mastership of the United Grand Lodge, the Supreme Grand Chapter, and Mark Grand Lodge. His installation as Grand Master of United Grand Lodge was a major media event, attended by 10,000 Masons. The largest building that could be procured for this meeting was the Great Exhibition Hall at Olympia in London. And it was stated that it could have been filled 3 times over if all those who wished to attend the ceremony could have been accommodated. And this, without the knowledge that the king was to take the leading part in it, a fact which the majority of those attending were ignorant about until they'd entered the building, and then it was announced that the king was about to arrive. It attracted an international audience, for whom the Lord Mayor of the City of London hosted a reception, attended by the Duke at the Mansion House. However, his rule was short because he lost his life, as you're probably well aware, in 1942 in a wartime air crash. The King, George VI, had looked forward to his brother's leadership of the craft, extending over what he called an even longer period than that served by your predecessor, the Duke of Connaught. Well, that hope sadly was dashed in 1942, but it was eventually fulfilled by Prince George's son, the present Duke of Kent, who was installed as Grand Master in 1967. By holding that office for 54 years now, he has comfortably surpassed the Duke of Connaught's record of 38 years. The Duke of Kent's Grand Mastership has been distinguished not only for its record-breaking length, but also for his leadership and his reformist approach during what was at many times a stormy period. From a media perspective, he had the most troubled tenancy of any Grand Master in the 20th century. His public endorsement of Freemasonry during 50 years provided it with an invaluable endorsement, and in a period when it was at times under heavy attack. His brother, Prince Michael, a photo of young Prince Michael, he was initiated in 1974 in Royal Alpha Lodge number 16, and he became Worshipful Master of that lodge in 1977. In 1982, he was installed as Provincial Grand Master of the Craft Province of Middlesex and Grand Master of the Mark Grand Lodge. In 1952, the husband of Princess Elizabeth, as she was then, was initiated into Freemasonry in Navy Lodge, number 2612. Prince Philip, Duke of Edinburgh, who sadly we lost so recently. I hope, brethren and ladies, I hope that I've shown that Freemasonry has benefited greatly from the membership of members of the royal family, so many members of that royal family, their powerful, strong endorsement which they gave it over the past 300 years has attracted much attention to the fraternity, and it's played a key role in the growth of our Masonic orders. And I think I'll stop at that point while you're still awake, I hope, and see if there's anyone has any questions that they'd like to pose. I'll try and answer them, but there's one I won't answer, and that's the one that nearly always comes up. In fact, it does always come up when people want to know who's going to be the next Royal Grand Master. And as I always say, I'm a historian, not a clairvoyant. So sidestepping that question, I'd be very pleased to take any of your other queries. If I can take this. Oh,
thank you, Paul. That's absolutely brilliant and fascinating talk. And I'm looking in the chat facility. We have got some lovely comments, Paul, but at this moment, no questions. But I'll just give people a little while. They may well be typing. But yeah, once again, thank you, Paul. That was brilliant. Thank you for giving up your very valuable time on a Sunday evening to speak to us all and impart your a small part of your wealth of knowledge on us. I'm sure at some time in the future that I will be bending your arm with a bottle of claret or something to do another talk for us.
That sounds wonderful. While there's a bit of a pause, can I do an unashamed commercial plug here? Because the Masonic, Lewis Masonic, the book publishers, would probably not forgive me if I didn't mention to you the fact that there's a book just been published on the history of Freemasonry in the 20th century. I'm told it's quite good. I don't know about that. But anyway, it's called This Checkered Existence, and it covers as a whole chapter about the royal connection. Now then, am I supposed to read these chat?
No, I'll read. The first question is from Ryan Smith. Do you think that the links with the royal family will continue in the modern world?
Well, I'm not a clairvoyant, as I say. I do think personally that it will. It's been something that's been very much a part of that family's history and of our organization's history for 3 centuries, and I don't imagine that it will cease. But that's about as far as I can go.
All right, thank you. And on the very similar question, but of a different vein. This is from Steve Parnell from West Kent. How do you foresee the royals of today stepping up to fill those very big shoes?
I think that's the same question, really, isn't it?
Sort of, really, but yeah.
I hope they do.
Yeah. Here we go. From Mark Nichols. I know you won't speculate on the next Grand Master. However, are there any of the younger members of the royal family who, in your... Oh, sorry, it's just clicked up again. Sorry. Members of the royal family who are in the craft, or was that the last members initiated the present Grand Master, Mark Grand Master, and Prince Philip?
Yeah, I don't. I'm not. Apart after Prince Philip's initiation, of course, the Duke of Kent, present Duke of Kent, and Prince Michael. But since then, I'm not aware of any others, and I'm pretty sure there aren't any others in the close royal family.
Yeah.
So far.
Yeah. In your opinion, would Masonry see an increase in membership if the Prince of Wales, William, or Harry became active or joined?
I think if a member of the royal family, the membership of members of the royal family has a powerful effect upon recruitment and retention of Freemasonry. It's been prove throughout this talk and throughout the history of Freemasonry that whenever there is a royal at the head of the organization, people want to join in big numbers to find out what it's about and why these people who have, after all the privileges of social preeminence, why should they choose to associate themselves with Freemasonry, and what do they get out of it?
Mm.
So I think it would definitely have a strong, good influence. Always, yeah, no, I won't say that.
Yeah, a very interesting it's from David Murray. Very interesting presentation. Thank you. I believe Princes William and Harry are involved today. Is that correct?
I don't think so.
No.
Oh, now women, yes. I should have, had I known there were some ladies present, and I would have added a little bit more about lady members of the royal family have given the organisation strong support for over a very long period in various ways, both as patrons of the royal of the Masonic charities. Various queens have occupied that office, and they've supported their husbands in numerous ways at Masonic events. You saw the photo I showed earlier of Queen Mary visiting the Royal Masonic Hospital, and she also took a very active part in the management of perhaps management, but a strong interest and involvement in the girls' school and indeed all the Masonic charities. So yes, the ladies have certainly played an important part, including our present Queen.
One from James. Do you think any, I hate it when it moves, any Masonic royal links during wartime helped with the war effort with other allies, etc., like the Masonic connections did in the American independence wars?
Right. Although not royal, consider how many noteworthy had an impact. Yeah, they certainly had a very big impact during the wars. Well, you saw that photo I showed of King George VI going to Freemasons Hall in his military uniform during the Second World War to install the new Grand Master, Lord Harwood, his brother-in-law, the one that married the Princess Royal that I mentioned earlier. And they also made a number of VIP visits to the Royal Masonic Hospital, and during the First World War to the Freemasons War Hospital. So lots of points there, really.
Yeah. I think we're coming to the end of them.
Well, let me just, it gives me a chance to...
I must just say, Alison, our apologies. We do forget that we are all brothers, whether we are male or female Masons. I think it's just our age creeps into us, and we refer to you as ladies. We are all brothers. Yes, thank you for that correction.
Thank you for the correction too. Now then, I was just looking up ladies who were involved, and in the book I've written female members of the British royal family have contributed to the public profile of Freemasonry in England and Wales. Mostly this was in passive roles as recipients of presents, gifts, messages of condolences from Masonic lodges. In addition, 4 queens, Victoria, Alexandra, Mary and Elizabeth II, were long-serving patrons of the Royal Masonic Institution for Girls. Many publications mentioned royal ladies supporting their men at Masonic events. For example, Princess Patricia accompanied her father, the Duke of Connaught, when he paid a visit to the Freemasons War Hospital, and Queen Mary accompanied her husband when they visited the Freemasons War Hospital, the Royal Masonic Hospital, and the Masonic Peace Memorial in Great Queen Street. Reflecting her own family's Masonic history, Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother, provided strong support for her husband at countless Masonic events over a period of more than 20 years. And similarly, the daughter of King George V, Princess Mary, Lord Harwood's wife, played a strong supporting role at Masonic events. So yeah, there's a lot to be said on that story as well.
I think, Paul, just the last question that's appeared on this from Martin. Although not royal, considering noteworthy Masons who have made a significant impact, have you looked much into the successive Lord Cornwallises, particularly Fiennes Cornwallis, the second Baron?
No, really interesting family connection there, the Cornwallises, and my friend John Reuter has done quite a bit of work on that, and perhaps you should invite him on one occasion to come and give a talk about the Cornwallis connection.
Noted.
There's a strong family story to be told there, Masonic story.
Thank you, Paul. I think that's the end of the questions, and once again, a huge thank you to you for giving up your time this evening for not only an interesting presentation but some very informative answers to questions posed off the cuff, which is nice. So
well, thank you. Thank you all very much indeed.
Thank you. If I may, before I hand back to James, anybody that's joined us after the initial intro, this evening's talk, we are the Ashlar Club of Sussex who are hosting tonight. If anybody is interested in anything we do, you can find us on all the normal social media channels, or drop me an email on info@theashlarclub.org.uk. We go out and about doing an awful lot of events socially and supporting the province of Sussex. Anybody and everybody is always welcome to join us, so feel free to get in touch.
What is the YouTube channel? You said YouTube channel. You can watch.
Oh no, all our social media, just the Ashlar Club Sussex. You'll find us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and all of those. And I try and keep up with them. But anybody and everybody is welcome to join us at anything, as James will confirm. But thank you so much. I will hand you back to James and mute myself.
Thank you, Ray, and thank you, Paul. That was extremely interesting, really, really good talk. I definitely learned a lot more, and I've got your handout here, and I'm going to have a good look at that, and I'm going to share that with my brethren as well. Really interesting, great stuff. We are looking for any clubs that would like to present over the next few months. If you have a New Young Masons club, or I know the New Young Masons, but if you have a light blues club or a club of your province that wants to present, please email me, james@nymc.org.uk, and we can get that arranged and that can be sorted out for you. Hopefully we'll all be back in our lodge room soon. It's getting very close, which is nice. A lot of people are doing LFIs and they're planning their meetings ready for, we got our Provincial Grand Lodge meeting, our AGM in August. That's right, isn't it, Ray? I think. So I'm looking forward to that. Again, thank you very much on behalf of the NYMC. This call will be recorded and you can share the link with your brethren in your lodges so they can see the talk as well. So without further ado, I will say thank you very much and we will close the meeting.